This is Savita Valsang and welcome to my channel Statistics Made Simple. In this video, I will explain the second method to solve a game, which is the dominance principle, and will find solutions to problems based on it, which is an important 5-marker. I will now explain the steps in the dominance principle. The steps are quite simple. The first step is you have to check if all the payoffs in the rth row of a payoff matrix is greater than or equal to all the payoffs in the sth row. Then AR dominates AS and we delete row AS. So the rth row and the sth row are two different rows in the payoff matrix. So when I solve problems based on a particular payoff matrix, you will understand the steps clearly. The second step is if all the payoffs in the pth column of a payoff matrix is less than or equal to all the payoffs in the qth column, then BP dominates BQ and we delete column BQ. Steps 1 and 2 are repeated till the saddle point is reached. Now, a simple way to remember the dominance principle is for the rows, we have to check whether all the payoffs in a particular row is greater than or equal to all the payoffs in another row. Then for columns, we have to check if all the payoffs in a particular column are less than or equal to all the payoffs in another column. So for rows, it is greater than or equal to the comparison, and for columns, it is less than or equal to. This is an important point to remember. Starting with the problems. Problem 1. In a rectangular game, the payoff matrix for player A is given below. First subdivision, solve the game using the dominance principle. Second subdivision, write the payoff matrix for player B. So we have the payoff matrix for player A given. So player A has the strategies A1, A2, A3, which are the rows, and player B has two strategies B1, B2, which are the columns. So the payoffs corresponding to A1 are 0 and -5. For A2, they are 10 and -2, and for A3, it is 20 and 5. So usually a problem based on the dominance principle is a 5-marker. Solution. Write the first subdivision. Let us consider the payoff matrix for player A. So write the payoff matrix which was given, that is player A has the strategies A1, A2, A3. Player B has the strategies B1 and B2, and the different payoffs are 0, -5, 10, -2, 20 and 5. This is given to us in the problem. Now at this side, for our understanding, for rows we will write greater than or equal to, and for columns we write less than or equal to. Now the first step is you compare one row with the remaining rows, and then once we finish all the row comparisons, we move on to the column comparisons. So the steps are like this. First I'll compare A1 with A2, then A1 with A3. Then I will check A2 with A1 and A2 with A3, and then A3 with A1 and A3 with A2. Once all the row comparisons are done, then we do the column comparisons. So I'll compare the payoffs in B1 with B2, and once that is done, then I will compare B2 with B1. So now let us see the first step. I have to compare A1 with A2. So you have to check for rows if all the payoffs in A1 are greater than or equal to all the payoffs in A2. So again I am repeating, I am comparing A1 with A2, and we have to use greater than or equal to. So you see that 0 is not greater than 10. So A1 with A2 doesn't work out. Now do A1 with A3. 0 is not greater than 20. So A1 and A3 also doesn't work out. Now do A2 with A1. 10 is greater than 0 and minus 2 is greater than minus 5. So we see that A2 dominates A1. So you delete A1. Now you have to compare A2 with A3. So 10 is not greater than 20. So it means that A2 doesn't work out with A3. Now next you have to compare A3 with A2 because A1 is already deleted. You have to compare A3 with A2. 20 is greater than 10 and 5 is greater than minus 2. So we see that A3 dominates A2. So you have to delete A2. So now the rows A1 and A2 are completely deleted and we have done all the comparisons for the rows. Next we will move to the columns. So for columns, remember that the payoffs should be less than or equal to. Okay, so now I'll compare B1 with B2. So only 20 is there. 20 is not less than 5. So B1 and B2 doesn't work out. Now compare B2 with B1. So 5 is less than 20. In other words, it means that B2 dominates B1. So you delete B1. So what remains now is only the payoff, which is 5. And I have highlighted that payoff, which is the saddle point by a star, which is in orange color. So this value is nothing but the value of the game. So the conclusion will be the value of the game is 5 and the best strategy for player A is A3 and the best strategy for player B is B2. In subdivision, we have to write the payoff matrix for player B. Now, how do we obtain the payoff matrix from player B is you have to interchange the rows with the columns and vice versa along with changing the sign of the payoffs. Okay, so the rows will now be the strategies of player B. So we have to write player B, the two strategies B1 and B2 and player A along with his strategies A1, A2, A3 are written as the columns. So all you have to do is the rows will become the columns and the column becomes the rows and 0 doesn't have a sign. Okay, so that remains unchanged. So corresponding to B1 it will be 0, minus 10 and minus 20 and corresponding to strategy B2 the payoffs are 5, 2 and minus 5. So all you have to do is when you have to write the payoff matrix for player B, you have to interchange the rows and the columns and you change the signs of the payoffs. So if the payoff has a positive sign, it becomes negative, and if the payoff had a negative sign, it becomes positive, and 0 will remain as it is. Problem 2. Solve the following game using the dominance principle. So the payoff matrix has player A strategies as A1, A2, A3 and player B strategies are B1, B2, B3 and B4. Corresponding to A1 the payoffs are 1, 2, 0, minus 3. Corresponding to the strategy A2 the payoffs are 4, 6, 3 and 5 and corresponding to the strategy A3 the payoffs are 3, 1, minus 2 and 0. Now let's start with the solution. Let us consider the payoff matrix for player A. So player A you write along with the strategies A1, A2, A3 and player B along with the strategies B1, B2, B3, B4 and all the payoffs are 1, 2, 0, minus 3, 4, 6, 3, 5, 3, 1, minus 2, 0. At this side the dominance principle you can write for your understanding. For rows you have to compare the payoffs with the greater than or equal to sign and for the columns so we have to use the comparison which is less than or equal to. So what is the procedure now? First compare A1 with A2, A1 with A3. then do A2 with A1 and A2 with A3, then do A3 with A1 and A3 with A2. Once all the row comparisons are done, then do the column comparisons. B1 should be compared first with B2, then B3 and B4. Similarly, B2 should be compared with B1, B3 and B4. B3 should be compared with B1, B2 and B4, and B4 will be compared with B1, B2 and B3. Let's start now. Compare A1 with A2 first. 1 is not greater than 4. Okay, so even if one of the payoffs are not greater, then you can just stop. Okay, so actually it is 1 is not greater than 4, 2 is not greater than 6, 0 is not greater than 3, and minus 3 is not greater than 5. Okay, so you need not do all the payoffs comparison. Even if one of the payoffs don't work out, then you can just stop. So A1 doesn't work out with A2. Next, do A1 with A3. So 1 is not greater than 3. Okay, so A1 and A3 doesn't work out. Now do A2 with A1. 4 is greater than 1, 6 is greater than 2, 3 is greater than 0, and 5 is greater than minus 3. Okay, so you see that A2 dominates A1, so you will delete A1. Now the next step is you have to compare A2 with A3. 4 is greater than 3, 6 is greater than 1, 3 is greater than minus 2, 5 is greater than 0. So it means that A2 dominates A3, so delete A3. So now A1 and A3 are both deleted. So we have finished the row comparisons. Now do the column comparisons. Let us compare B1 with B2. So for columns it should be less than or equal to. So now you see that 4 is less than 6. So it means that B1 dominates B2. So you have to delete column B2. So delete column B2. Now compare B1 with B3. Now 4 is not less than 3. So B1, B3 doesn't work out. Next do B1 with B4. So you see that 4 is less than 5. So it means that B1 dominates B4. So delete B4. So you have compared B1 with B2, B3 and B4, and you see that the column B2 and column B4 are deleted. So now all that remains is you have to compare B3 with B1. So 3 is less than 4. So in other words, it means that B3 dominates B1 and you have to delete B1. I have explained all the steps in the previous slide. Now listing down the steps, we had first A2 dominates A1, delete A1, then A2 dominates A3, delete A3, B1 dominates B2, delete B2, B1 dominates B4, delete B4, B3 dominates B1, delete B1. So we have seen that in the final payoff matrix, the only payoff which is remaining is 3, which I have highlighted in orange color with a star, and this position is the saddle point of the payoff matrix. So the final conclusion is the value of the game is 3 and the best strategy for player A is A2 and the best strategy for player B is B3. Problem 3. Solve the following game using the dominance principle. Player A has the strategies as A1, A2, A3 and player B has the strategies B1, B2, B3 and B4. And corresponding to A1, the payoffs are 3, 2, 1, 6. Corresponding to A2, it is 3, 1, 0, 4. And corresponding to the strategy A3, the payoffs are 3, 4, minus 3 and 0. Start with the solution. First write down the payoff matrix for player A, which is given to us in the problem. That is, player A has the strategies A1, A2, A3. Player B's strategies are B1, B2, B3, B4. And the payoffs which are given are 3, 2, 1, 6, 3, 1, 0, 4, 3, 4, minus 3 and 0. So at this side, you can write for your understanding, for rows, the comparison should be greater than or equal to, and for the columns, the comparison should be less than or equal to. The first step is to compare A1 with A2 and A1 with A3, then A2 with A1, A2 with A3, and then A3 with both A1 and A2. Similarly, for the columns, compare B1 with B2, then B1 with B3, B1 with B4, then compare B2 with B1, B3 and B4, then B3 with B1, B2 and B4, and then B4 with B1, B2 and B3. So let us now compare A1 with A2. 3 is equal to 3, 2 is greater than 1, 1 is greater than 0, and 6 is greater than 4. So it means that A1 dominates A2, so delete A2. Now compare A1 with A3. 3 is equal to 3, but 2 is not greater than 4. So A1 and A3 doesn't work out. Now compare A3 with A1. 3 is equal to 3, 4 is greater than 2, but minus 3 is not greater than 1. So A3 and A1 doesn't work out. So we have finished the row comparisons. Now let us do the column comparisons. So keep in mind that the rows A2 and A3 are deleted. Now let us compare B1 with B2. 3 is not less than 2. Okay, so B1 and B2 doesn't work out. Now compare B1 with B3. 3 is not less than 1. So B1, B3 also doesn't work out. Now compare B1 with B4. So 3 is less than 6. B1 dominates B4. Delete B4. We have compared B1 with B2, B3 and B4. Now we compare B2 with B1. So we see that 2 is less than 3. So it means that B2, it dominates B1, so delete B1. So now we have seen that the columns B1 and B4 are already deleted. Now the next step is you have to compare B3 with B2. Okay, so when you compare B3 with B2, 1 is less than 2. So in other words, B3 dominates B2, so you delete B2. So now you see that the columns B1, B2 and B4 are all deleted, and the only payoff which is remaining is 1. So the value of the game is 1. The best strategy for player A is A1 and the best strategy for player B is B3. Problem 4. Find the value of the game using the dominance principle. Player A has the strategies A1, A2, A3, A4 and player B's strategies are B1, B2, B3, B4 and the pairs corresponding to the strategies A1 are -7, 0, 3, -5. The payoffs corresponding to the strategy A2 are 7, -2, 0, -4. For strategy A3, the payoffs are 2, -1, -2, 0 and the payoffs for strategy A4 are 4, 2, 3 and 6. Solution: consider the payoff matrix for player A which is as given above. Now remember that for the rows, the comparison should be greater than or equal to for the payoffs and for the columns, the comparisons are less than or equal to. So let us now compare A1 with A2. -7 is not greater than 7. So A1 and A2 doesn't work out. Compare A1 with A3. Again, -7 is not greater than 2. So A1, A3 also doesn't work out. Now compare A1 with A4. -7 is not greater than 4. So A1 doesn't work out with A2, A3 and A4. Next, compare A2 with A1. 7 is greater than -7 but -2 is not greater than 0. So A2 and A1 doesn't work out. Compare A2 with A3. 7 is greater than 2 but -2 is not greater than -1. So A2 and A3 also doesn't work out. Now compare A2 with A4. 7 is greater than 4 but -2 is not greater than 2. So A2 and A4 also doesn't work out. Now compare A3 with A1. 2 is not greater than minus 7. So again A3 and A1 doesn't work out. Compare A3 with A2. 2 is not greater than 7. So again A3 and A2 also doesn't work out. Compare A3 with A4. 2 is not greater than 4. So A3 doesn't work out with A1, A2 and A4. Now let's compare A4 with A1. So 4 is greater than minus 7, 2 is greater than 0, 3 is equal to 3 and 6 is greater than minus 5. So it means that A4 dominates A1, so you have to delete A1. Next you compare A4 with A2. 4 is not greater than 7. So A4 and A2 doesn't work out. Now compare A4 with A3. 4 is greater than 2. 2 is greater than minus 1. 3 is greater than minus 2. 6 is greater than 0. So A4 dominates A3. Delete A3. Now that the row comparisons are complete, let us do the column comparisons, and for the column comparisons it should be less than or equal to. Let us compare B1 with B2. Now remember that A1 and A3 rows are deleted. So when we are comparing B1 and B2, you will see that 7 is not less than minus 2, though 4 is less than 2. So B1 and B2 doesn't work out. Now do B1 with B3. Again 7 is not less than 0. So B1 and B3 also doesn't work out. Then compare B1 with B4. 7 is not less than minus 4. So B1 doesn't work out with B2, B3 and B4. Now let us compare B2 with B1. So when you do that, you will see that minus 2 is less than 7 and 2 is less than 4. So it means that B2 dominates B1. So delete the column B1. Now compare B2 with B3. So when you compare B2 with B3, you see that minus 2 is less than 0 and 2 is less than 3. So it means that B2 dominates B3 and you delete column B3. Next, you compare B2 with B4. So when you compare B2 with B4, you see that minus 2 is not less than minus 4, whereas 2 is less than 6. B2 and B4 doesn't work out. Now compare B4 with B2. When you compare B4 with B2, minus 4 is less than minus 2, but 6 is not less than 2. So B4 and B2 also don't work out. So let's go back to the rows now. Let us compare A4 with A2. So for rows, remember that it should be greater than or equal to. So 2 is greater than minus 2 and 6 is greater than 4. So it means that A4 dominates A2. So delete A2. Now the rows A1, A2 and A3 are all deleted and we are left with only B2 and B4 columns. So let us now compare B2 with B4. So when you compare B2 with B4, you see that 2 is less than 6. So in other words, B2 dominates B4. So delete column B4. So listing down the steps according to the explanation given in the previous slide, we have A4 dominates A1, so delete A1, then A4 dominates A3, delete A3, B2 dominates B1, delete B1, B2 dominates B3, delete B3, A4 dominates A2, delete A2, and B2 dominates B4, delete B4. So we are left with only the value 2, which is highlighted with an orange star. So this is where the saddle point exists. So write the conclusion. The value of the game is 2. The best strategy for player A is A4 and the best strategy for player B is B2. Problem 5. Find the value of the game using the dominance principle. So the payoff matrix for player A has the strategies as A1, A2, A3 and player B's strategies are B1, B2, B3 and B4. The payoffs are -1, 2, 0, -4, 5, 7, 4, 6, 4, -2, 3 and 0. Solution. Consider the payoff matrix for player A, where player A has the strategies A1, A2, A3. Player B's strategies are B1, B2, B3 and B4. The payoffs for the strategy A1 are -1, 2, 0, -4. Corresponding to the strategy A2, the payoffs are 5, 7, 4, and 6. And corresponding to the strategy A3, the payoffs are 4, -2, -3, and 0. Now let us do the row comparisons first. I will compare A1 with A2. So -1 is not greater than 5. So A1 doesn't work out with A2. Now let's compare A1 with A3. -1 is not greater than 4. So A1 doesn't work out with A2 and A3. Now let's compare A2 with A1. 5 is greater than -1, 7 is greater than 2, 4 is greater than 0, and 6 is greater than -4. So A2 dominates A1. Now delete A1. Next compare A2 with A3. 5 is greater than 4, 7 is greater than -2, 4 is greater than -3, and 6 is greater than 0. So A2 dominates A3, delete A3. Now A1 and A3 rows are deleted and we have only the row A2 remaining. So let us do the column comparisons where the payoff should be less than or equal to. Comparing B1 with B2, 5 is less than 7. So B1 dominates B2, delete B2. Next, we will compare B1 with B3. 5 is not less than 4. So B1 and B3 doesn't work out. Next, do B1 with B4. 5 is less than 6. So B1 dominates B4. Delete B4. Columns B2 and B4 are deleted. Now let us compare again B3 with B1. So 4 is less than 5, which means that B3 dominates B1. Delete B1. So delete column B1. Now we are left with only one payoff, which is 4, and that is the position of the saddle point. So it is highlighted by an orange star. Write the conclusion. The value of the game is 4. The best strategy for player A is A2 and the best strategy for player B is B3. The maximum minimax principle and the dominance principle are the two methods by which we can find out the value of a game. Now in the question, when they say solve the game and they don't mention the method, it can be solved using either of the two methods. But in particular, if they specify solve the problem using the dominance principle, then you have to use only that particular method. Otherwise, marks will not be allocated. This topic is an important one. Do practice the problems thoroughly. Thank you all for watching and look out for my next video, which will be uploaded shortly.